From Nate Diaz putting Conor McGregor in submission to the GOAT Amanda Nunes getting dethroned by Juliana Pena, our first shocker comes from UFC 196, where Conor McGregor, the king of trash talk, was up against Nate Diaz. This classic UFC match will go down in history. Just 11 days before the match, the reigning title holder broke his foot, putting the pay-per-view show in jeopardy. But in stepped veteran Octagon tough guy Nate Diaz, agreeing to fight at 170-pound catchweight.
They're not on my level. You've got to have size, reach, length. You've got to have some attributes. If you come in any way equal to me, I'm going to rip your whole head off, and that's it.
On fight night, Diaz arrived as a huge underdog against Conor McGregor, who dominated the opening 5 minutes with his striking. But Diaz was resilient, and as the second round began, he took control of the fight. Eventually, he worked his way into position for a rear naked choke that forced McGregor to tap out at 4:12. McGregor evened the score 5 months later at UFC 202 with a majority decision. But fans are still waiting for the highly anticipated trilogy fight 6 years later. This is what the UFC is all about, folks. Exciting matchups that keep us on the edge of our seats. Like Diaz, Rose Namajunas was also the underdog in her fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Jędrzejczyk was a dominant force in the UFC strawweight division, winning the title and defending it 5 times with her unmatched striking ability.
I'm proud of myself, man. I've been training for this fight 5 months, really hard, every single day. This is what people sometimes don't see.
In 2017, though, she faced off against Namajunas, who was considered an underdog with a less impressive record. Namajunas shocked the world by finishing Jędrzejczyk in just over 3 minutes, becoming the new champion.
And as a matter of fact, I want to build Earthship MMA academies around the world. I think that's going to be a solution to a lot of our problems in the world.
Joanna was determined to reclaim her title in a rematch 5 months later. The two fighters battled it out in a close fight, but Jędrzejczyk ultimately won by unanimous decision, solidifying her status as one of the greatest women's strawweights. Both fighters continued to have success in the UFC, but Jędrzejczyk had 2 unsuccessful attempts at capturing titles in both the strawweight and flyweight divisions before retiring after a knockout loss to Zhang Weili in 2021. Rose lost her title to Jessica Andrade, but regained it in 2021 with a victory over Zhang Weili. The rivalry between Jędrzejczyk and Namajunas will always be remembered as one of the greatest in UFC history. Their contrasting styles and intense battles inside the octagon were a sight to behold, and their legacy in the sport will never be forgotten. Despite their ups and downs, both fighters have left an indelible mark on the UFC, inspiring countless fans with their tenacity and skill in the octagon. Up next, we have the fight between Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman.
Silva in the yellow and black trunks like always. Blue trunks for Weidman.
Silva was a straight-up legend and had been ruling the middleweight division for nearly 7 years. He defended his title 10 times, with 8 of those being finishes, and had a perfect UFC record of 16-0. That's insane. But when he faced Weidman at UFC 162, things didn't go as planned. The first 5 minutes of the fight were a bit rough for Silva, but he started playing to the crowd and mocking Weidman in the second round. And that's when he paid the price, getting hit with a combo that put him out cold. And Weidman became the new champ at just 1 minute and 18 seconds of the round. Since then, it's been a bumpy road for both fighters. Silva broke his leg in a rematch against Weidman just 5 months later, failed a drug test in 2015, and ended his UFC career with 5 losses in 6 fights, including a TKO loss to Uriah Hall in 2020. Weidman defended his title twice more before losing it to Luke Rockhold at UFC 194, and he's been struggling ever since, with only 2 wins in 7 fights, including that nasty broken leg against Hall at UFC 261. So don't get too cocky in the UFC, or you might end up like Silva and Weidman. The next fight was a huge shock to all UFC fans out there. Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey was just insane.
Ronda has had, other than the Miesha Tate fight. This is not what Holly wants.
Ronda was once the face of the UFC. She was a global phenomenon, a champion that destroyed opponents in the octagon and crossed over to Hollywood in the WWE. She was 12-0 in MMA and 6-0 in the UFC, with each win coming inside the distance. Her last 4 fights totaled a mere 130 seconds combined. That's why Holm, despite being a decorated boxer and champion, was thought of as a mere speed bump to Rousey's reign. But things didn't go as planned for Rousey that night at UFC 193. Holm proved more than a match match for her in striking, keeping Rousey off balance and consistently landing punches. The champion appeared to gas out as the first round came to a close, setting the stage for Holmes' spectacular finish in the second. She landed a high kick to the right side of Rousey's head, leaving her defenseless, and earned a TKO victory in the process. It was a stunning upset, and it marked the end of Rousey's dominance in the UFC. She fought once more, losing in just 48 seconds to Amanda Nunes before leaving for the WWE. As for Holmes, she lost the bantamweight title to Miesha Tate in her first defense 4 months later. And while she's still a fan favorite, her career since that night has been up and down, with a record of just 4-5 in 9 fights. She'll look to turn things around in her next bout, but as always in the UFC, anything can happen. Now don't get me wrong, these fights were shocking, but watching TJ Dillashaw versus Renan Barão kept everyone on the edge of their seats.
The toughest training camp I've been through because of that, emotionally, you know? That's why I was talking to about his weak stand-up, because I didn't want him to wrestle, man. I knew that was the case. I told the ref in the back.
Barão was a force to be reckoned with. He went on a 33-fight win streak with only one no contest after his debut loss in 2005.
TJ in the southpaw stance here.
Beautiful jab by TJ. Nice knee by TJ. Oh, he hurt him.
That's a serious accomplishment, my friends. But TJ Dillashaw didn't let that intimidate him when they faced off at UFC 173. Sure, he had lost a fight to Rafael Assunção just 2 fights earlier, but he still came in strong. In the 5th round of their fight, Dillashaw proved he was the real deal. He unleashed a series of strikes, including a head kick and punches, that took down the champ and earned him both the fight of the night and performance of the night bonuses. He then went on to successfully defend the title before facing Barão once again at UFC on Fox in 2015, where he defeated him in the 4th round. As for Barão, he fought 7 more times in the UFC but only won once. Dillashaw went on to win and lose the bantamweight title and also challenged Cejudo for the flyweight belt, but unfortunately failed a drug test and had to take a 2-year break. This fight was amazing, but the craziest shocker came from Juliana Pena versus Amanda Nunes. When Nunes faced Pena at UFC 269 in December 2021, she was already a 2-division champion with a 12-fight win streak that had spanned 6 years, making her the undisputed queen of the female mixed martial arts world. But nobody expected Pena to be a real challenge for Nunes, who had finished 5 of her previous 9 title fights in the first round. The first round went according to plan. Nunes landed 71% of her significant strikes and took Pena down, while Pena suffered a nasty eye injury. However, as the second round began, something seemed off with Nunes. She began to tire, and Pena capitalized on her weakness, eventually taking her to the ground and locking her in a rear naked choke that forced Nunes to submit at 3 minutes and 26 seconds. Pena had been talking a big game in the lead up to the fight, and she proved everyone wrong by dethroning the champ. As she said after the fight, "I'm not surprised. I told you so. Don't ever doubt me again. Willpower, strength, and determination. It will take you places." And that's all for the most shocking UFC losses.